I'm going to tell you folks about a miracle um, that most times I don't believe in Chinese tools. And if I cut wood for, say, a living or trees or whatever, I probably wouldn't own that. I would have bought the Oregon. Uh, do I have any regrets, though? Let me explain something about chainsaws because I'm no stranger. I've got two Poulons, the poo-poo saws. I've got two of these, and I've never been more disappointed, especially these Mickey Mouse goofy caps. You can see there's oil on this saw. I didn't clean it up from yesterday. I used this, though. It worked really good, finally. And I'm going to explain what I think was the issue. Husqvarna, two of those. One of these, two of these, two of these. And I got one of these off-brand Steels. I think it's a clone saw. I got a hold of that during COVID. That's how I got those Poulons. There's a third one. It was my late business partners. We're going to leave you there with this. And let me tell you, these are what they call a pulse engine or an impulse engine. It pulls the fuel according to how fast the cylinder, the fuel and the air, how fast that cylinder is moving, the piston. Okay. My problem was when I was taking these chains, as you can see on that box, it says to be sharpened. I used to take them to a shop. I'd get maybe 10 or 12 good cuts, and then the saw would be revving, and you start getting that curve cut because you're forcing the saw. Well, let me tell you something. That didn't happen to me yesterday. Um, Two things when you're an engineer, you experiment with things. I increased the pitch, or I should say the angle, by 3 degrees on this chain. Now you can't really see 3 degrees in a video, but that means when you work that little dial, I cut them a little steeper so they were a little more on an angle. I went 2 days with this chain. I'm going to show you the size rack I filled in about 4 days up here on the right. And I don't know with this lighting, so we'll walk beyond. But there's that big rack up there on the right. Some of that's equipment over there to be fixed. But that rack there on the right, I filled all that in 4 days. I'm talking cut the trees down. They weren't down trees, they were diseased. Cut them up, then split them. Paul Bunyan stopped by. He was trying to buy that log splitter off me. And Babe was with him. I thought he had a butt plug up the ox's ass, but turns out he had a tow hitch. He was desperate for that thing. See, I guess he's getting old too. Kind of like Raggedy Ann and Andy on Social Security ain't doing too well. I don't think any of the seniors are. Being self-sufficient, okay, is something I want to make a point about giving the Chinese at Harbor Freight your money. Okay, I never would have bought that there because I don't really like their tools. But it's like my son says he doesn't have much problem with their tools, but he doesn't use their tools like I do. Like I said, if I would be a professional tree cutter, I would have a different setup and probably a dedicated bench. Just like me, I've got to clear shit out of my way just to work on one of these saws because I'm mainly automotive. But in the fall, not being able to afford a couple cords of firewood like I normally am, I'm in a bind. And what happened now, to make this long story, I hate when guys on YouTube stretch bullshit out. These saws magically started running right and starting easier simply because of the chains. And I don't know if it was me altering the pitch, but all I'm saying is when I took them down here to this shop, they were charging $5 a chain. They're now charging $8 a chain. I'd get maybe a dozen or two really good cuts in, and the chains would start, like I said, it would start skating and the engines would start revving. And I would go through two, maybe three chains in 2 days. I had that chain on there. It's still sharp. I can still cut with it. Maybe it's the stone, the type of stone that's on there. I'm actually going to order another stone. And it does that. If you guys are disappointed, I've seen other sharpeners. I was exploring, and I was watching them on YouTube, and I pay attention with this. My eyes and my ears. Remember I told you I can smell a bad engine in a vehicle, and people don't know how I do that. There's certain scents, and when you've been working with something long enough, I'm not a lifelong engineer of two-cycle. You see, I'm still learning. But as I'm telling you, it straightened out my hard starting problems. They start right up real easy after I've been cutting. And I attribute that to the saw getting overheated from some retard not knowing how to sharpen chains. But getting back to that machine, I've seen some of them other machines are really high RPM. And when I'm looking at how that was making the cut to sharpen, it wasn't a real fine. It was really like a jagged, like a serrated, like a serration. Now, did that help? Does that help the cut? I don't know. You see, again, I'm going to do that like whatchamacallit does on Vice Grip Garage there, Derek. I don't know, but I do know that all three saws, the chains would start skating after a couple of cuts, and I was just getting very disparaged over the years, very disparaged. I've been taking that, as long as I've owned this, I've been taking my stuff down there sometimes when I don't have time to get it fixed, and forever the chains to get sharpened. But I was surprised at the magic that that little tool worked. So it wasn't my insanity. It was just my lack of knowledge again. In other words, you learn all your life. I don't care if it's later in life, but as I told my son, he does not use the tools and stuff like I do. So the sander he bought that he said he loves, that he bought a couple tools there. And he loves the tools I give him because they're the real deal. He has a power saw, and he was like, Dad, that saw cut. I've had other saws. I've thrown them away. Well, a DeWalt or the older Porter cables and the older Bosch. I have two of those older Bosch saws, and I have two of the older Makita saws. I won't give them up. When I'm dead, somebody else can have them. But when I need those saws, they don't bind, they don't kick back. You put a nice sharp blade in them, you get a nice sharp cut, precision. My son is amazed at how I can cut wood and make shit fit together real tight. It is part skill, but a lot of it's the tools that you're working with, okay? I'm not going to toot my horn. When you have bigger tools, better tools, a heavier duty tool, that's the real deal. It's worth it. And that's why I used to go to swap meets, flea markets. I got a lot of auto parts and automotive stuff that way. I can't afford to buy it brand new, especially on a veterans, pay that we're getting. We're getting it shoved right up our asses by this president. I think all the seniors are, not just it's veterans and seniors. Every one of them's getting it up the ass, and disabled people. Take it from somebody who owns saws and has to fix their own saws. I can't take them to a shop. But this one was giving me a hard time, even cold starting. I ran it with that chain on there all day. And this one, I use this for limbing. So when the tree comes down and it crashes, and I got to teach you how to cut a tree and make it fall the direction you want to, not just with the undercut in the front, but by using wedges. That way the tree's not going to twist and it's not going to come back at you unless it bounces off of something, and I've had that happen to me more than once. But I used both those saws, and they were magically, when I would just one pull, there's no 2, 3, 4 pulls. This one, these pull-ons, are a little bit like the Husqvarna. They've got these primer bulbs, which I wished every saw. Everybody knows what the primer bulb is, but the steel does not have one. And it didn't hurt the steel. It used to piss me off. I was so disparaged with those steel saws. I kept returning them to the dealer because they did not run right. They did not restart right. But the last 3 days have been a milestone. Ever since I bought that little gizmo and I modified the base that I made for it. Am I disappointed? No. Chinese, I gladly gave them that 40 bucks because to buy something that I can't afford in the situation that I'm in, it would be a real kick in the pants. So take it from me about their impulse engine. I don't care how you adjust them. If they're not running right and you're going through chains and your chain gets dull right away, it might be the guy sharpening them. And then I'm going to tell you about those hand sharpeners and that. Once they get full of that oil, okay, just like that, that's why I'm going to get a couple of those wheels, because they're not going to sharpen. And I don't care how you try to get the oil, the carb cleaner, or soaking them, there's still residual oil. and it probably will start affecting the future sharpening. So I'm going to call Harbor Freight and see if I can get a couple of those wheels. And when I do encounter that problem, because that might be the shop's problem down there, and it might not be that they don't know how to sharpen, they just don't know that that wheel needs to be changed. Because again, when they do a chain and then they test the saw and put it back on the saw or whatever, they might think it's working fine, but they don't realize that it's getting dull right away. And that could be, like I said, maybe the wheel skates, it doesn't do enough of that. Like I said, it had a real heavy serration when that wheel bit into it or whatever. And then, like I said, I increased the pitch. I would not go beyond 5 degrees pitch, increasing pitch on any of those. And it also decreases the life. You're not going to get that many sharpens, when you take that much out of the chain. But for what it did to me, I was very happy. As I said, I impressed myself that I actually filled that entire rack within a couple days' time. We got the ATV guys over here. And we have a rooster down here that crows in the afternoon, not in the morning. I think he's a city boy. Get my point. That thing kind of restored my faith in buying something on an impulse like I did. I bought that on an impulse because I needed it. The impulse necessity. I need it now. I don't want to wait for eBay. I don't want to wait for Amazon. And you have that money in your pocket and you figure, well, better spend on a bill or food. No, my saw did its job, all right? I'm a little tired. I'm a little tuckered out yesterday. That was a hell of a hustle. That was a lot of wood I cut up yesterday. But I did not expect that I would fill that rack either, not like I did. And there's 2 more trees over there. These trees in the Northeast are so diseased. It's better to cut them up while they're still worth something now. Even if I cut them down and put them on my other rack. I have another back rack back there. It's better than wasting the wood and just letting it lay in the woods. And do I like taking the trees down because I love trees? No. That's why I live here. I've lived in the desert. I've lived in Calvert, Texas. I've been out to California, and I am not fond of the people out there, believe me. And that's why I'm kind of like in this seclusion here where I live. I just like the trees, but I don't like having to cut them up for firewood. I'd rather buy it from somebody else and not know where they came from. Kind of like that. Thanks for watching my videos.